Good morning, everyone. All right, thank you for joining us, everybody. My name is Suzanne Tagan, and I am the Assistant Director at the Center for the New Energy Economy. And our center is housed within Colorado State University and was founded by Governor Ritter when he left office in 2011. And I hope you've been able to join our previous webinars in this series. It's a series of 8 webinars, and we're calling it the Energy Transition Academy because it's not one of those series of webinars where you just, turn off your screen and do your email and listen to the webinar. It's we like it to be participatory, and we have speakers very purposefully chosen. Today, we're going to hear from 3 different states and 2 people from each of the 3 states, and we can have some Q&A at the end of that. And if we don't have time today for the Q&A, we will have a discussion session for this webinar on December 6th. And I should remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, so people can watch it later online if they need to, before the December 6th webinar when we have our discussion. And the discussion on December 6th will also encompass this past Tuesday's webinar, where we heard from our other 3 states. So if you haven't been able to see our other webinars, we'll put that link in the chat box. And as you can see from the upper left corner there, most of us are from the Rocky Mountain West, and we are starting this academy with the understanding and realization that there is an energy transition happening across the country and really across the world. And in the US, there are about 200 communities that are facing the very challenging reality of coal mine and coal plant closures within the next decade. So we're not going to focus on how we got into this industrial shift or why, that's for a different webinar, but we're here to talk about how we can help the communities who have provided our reliable electricity from coal over many decades, the workers and their families and their communities. So if this is not happening in your coal towns, in your state, and we heard on Tuesday from folks who, that the transition isn't happening yet, but there's still a benefit to diversifying economies and making sure that your community is not reliant on one industry. And also there's an advantage to hearing other people's experiences as they prepare for job losses and really these big cultural and economic shifts. And so if not this energy transition, your town might be affected by the next economic shift, because we know that more are coming. And a lot of times in this webinar series and in past years in the webinar series, I have read a land acknowledgement at this time. And I'm not going to do that today. We've also acknowledged the controversy around land acknowledgements. So we're putting a link in the chat to a really good resource page by Montana University System about land acknowledgements. I guess, yeah, so I'll leave it at that for today. And if you have questions, please type them into the chat. And if everybody could just right now post in the chat where they're from, like the state that you're from, it would be great for us to know where people are zooming in from. So just maybe your town and your state, or even just your state, would be great. Just go ahead and post that in the chat so we can see. And we are today going to hear from state leaders in Arizona and Utah and New Mexico about how things are going for their coal communities. And our moderator today is Amanda Ormond. We're lucky to have her. She is the co-director of the Just Energy Transition Center at Arizona State University. And I won't read her full bio, but she wears many hats, and she's worked in energy and public policy for more than 30 years in Arizona and the West. And she served for 7 years as the state director at the Arizona Energy Office. So over to you, Amanda, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Suzanne. Appreciate it. And thanks for all our speakers who agreed to get on today, because I think we've got a great discussion. So what I wanted to do is introduce your panelists so you know who you're hearing from. Then I'm going to give you a couple remarks about the Just Energy Transition Center and some of the work that we're going to do. And then we're going to talk, we're going to have our New Mexico speakers, our Arizona speakers, and then our Utah speakers go. As we go through the webinar, as Suzanne mentioned, we may not have time for questions, but if you have clarifying questions or deeper questions, please put them in the chat and we'll track them. We'll try to answer what we can as we go, and then we will roll over to the 6th if we can't get to that. So we're very pleased to have Supervisor Lena Fowler here. She's a supervisor in Coconino County, which is one of the northern Arizona counties. She's a third-time supervisor, so she's serving her 3rd term. She is Navajo from the Bitter Water Clan. She's been a leader in our state in transition issues because of Navajo generating station closing, and she's also worked extensively with other neighboring counties to think about economic redevelopment. So we're glad she's here. We also have Ken Clark, who is the Arizona State Director for the Energy Foundation Coalition. That's a coalition of entities working on developing a clean energy future. Ken served as a representative from 2015 to 2019. He's also been a State Energy Office Director, and I think there's like 4 people that are speaking today that all have worked for the state energy offices. So go state energy offices. And he's also served as a policy advocate. So those are our Arizona speakers. In New Mexico, we're going to hear from Jason Sandell. He is the commission convener for the New Mexico Energy Transition Act. So I think he's got the most interesting title because commission convener, I've never heard as a title before. He, on his day job, he is an executive vice president for Aztec Well family companies. So it's a family company, and he's the 3rd generation to run that company. He also, as I mentioned, the convener for the New Mexico Energy Transition Commission or Committee, and he's the chairman of the Western States and Tribal Nations Natural Gas Initiative. So he is a busy individual. And then we're pleased to have Economic Development Division Director in New Mexico, Mark Roper. He's a 7th generation New Mexican, and he's been the team lead for economic development for the agency since 2014. Under that role, he does economic assistance, job training, Main Street, international trade, and science and technology. And those are our New Mexico speakers. And then when we shift to Utah, we have Stuart Clausen. Stuart is the Regional Growth Director for the Utah Association of Counties. He has been the Deputy Director for Salt Lake City Department of Regional Transportation, Housing, and Economic Development. He has almost 20 years of experience in economic development internationally, nationally, and in the region. And then last but not least, we have Alyssa Kay, who's also in Utah. She's the Program Director for the Utah Office of Energy Development, where she works on a plethora of issues, including energy education, energy efficiency, energy security, advanced transportation, renewable energy, and distributed energy. She also teaches classes at Salt Lake City Community College in energy management and residential building energy. So we've got some really talented individuals that are going to talk to you today. So as the director or co-director of the Just Energy Transition Center, it's a center that was created at Arizona State University. ASU is a land grant university. We created it in 2019 because we recognize that there's a large energy transition coming. And if we don't do something about rural counties, that we're really headed towards kind of a train wreck. So we formed that with Attorney General-elect Chris Mays. I'm very happy to know that she is going to be our next Attorney General, although we're really sad to lose her at the center. But we started working in 2019, and the first thing we did was go out to all the areas that we're going to have closing coal plants and talk to the communities and let them know that ASU was going to be developing this program, and we'd like to help them think about transition. So we've been working on this for a couple of years, and we've been working primarily with the Cholla plant communities, which are Joseph City is the primary community across from the plant, but there's others in the area. And then also the Coronado plant, which is St. John's, Arizona in Apache County. So we've been working primarily with those counties and those communities, and we went after an economic development agency grant, a US ETA grant, to try to think about transition. And we were glad to see that we got $1 million grant to be able to do 3 primary things. One is to look at, and I should mention, these plants are not closed. Cholla will close in 3 years. Coronado slated to close in about 9 years. Our grant was set up to look at what are the assets in these facilities, because it's our hope that as the plant closes, instead of grazing and removing all the equipment and all the buildings and infrastructure that's part of a power plant, that we might be able to retain some of the assets and repurpose those for other economic development purposes. As you all know, there's pumps and roads and sewers and water treatment and electrical, all types of components. So our grant program is going to do 3 things. One, it's going to assess what are the assets in the plant and the condition of those assets. You may have boilers, but maybe they're, you know, old and they need to be removed instead of repurposed. So we're gonna look at the assets of the plant. The next task we want to do is look at, well, based on the assets that are there. So for example, in Joseph City, they're on I-40. They also have a major rail corridor going through there. What are the type of economic assets that could be put in there? So what kind of jobs could we attract? How could we repurpose that facility? So that's the second task. The third task is really to pull together a coalition to think about repurposing of these coal plants. 4 coal plants in northern Arizona, 1 is closed, 3 are still to close. The region takes a really large hit once all those plants are closed economically. And so we want to look regionally at what can we do to bring in jobs and economic development. Arizona has been phenomenally successful recently on in areas of economic or electric vehicles, getting electric vehicle manufacturers starting to get component entities to locate, but that's primarily in the Phoenix metropolitan areas. Is there an opportunity to bring some of those types of businesses north? Semiconductors is also an industry that's really boomed in the Phoenix metropolitan area. So seeing about whether we can kind of build this cluster concept into northern Arizona. So the challenges that we face is there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know exactly when these plants are going to close. We don't know exactly what the utilities are going to do with them. I think another challenge is that there is no shared regional identity, that the region does work together in many different aspects, but on coal closure, I think Supervisor Fowler can really speak to this about how we're gelling or not. And then I think in opportunities, there is a lot of opportunities because we've got these facilities and we've got this infrastructure. We need a regional support group to be thinking about how do we create economic development in the region. We need the state to get involved. The state has been nowhere. We don't have an Energy Transition Act. We have not had any policy that really is supportive of transition. And with a new governor coming in, I think that we've got a unique opportunity. And then obviously we want to take advantage of federal monies. There's so many monies that are available. We need to be thinking about what do we want to plan for so we know what to go ask for. So I think that there's incredible opportunities. I know I get anxious because I think that with these federal monies, this is a one-time shot. We need to make sure we take advantage of them. We need to make sure that we have the timing and the collaboration to do our best work, but things are moving quickly. And for Joseph City, this plant closes in 3 years. And you all know economic development takes a long time. And so 3 years is just not a lot of time to think about how do you re-envision these communities. So as you all know, there's work ahead. So let me close with that. And I want to turn to our speakers. So we're going to start with New Mexico and we're going to start with Jason. So Jason and Mark are going to kind of do a tag team to let us know what's going on with New Mexico.
Well, good morning, Amanda, and thank you very much for that very insightful introduction and review of what's going on in Arizona and the work that you're doing. I'm going to work on bringing up my slides here real quick, sharing my screen. There we are. And as you said, I'm a convener of the Energy Transition Act Community Advisory Commission is the role that I play, and with me today is Director Mark Roper with the New Mexico Economic Development Department. And it's just an absolute pleasure to be able to be speaking with the Energy Transition Academy here today. The first thing that I need to do, and I do before I give any sort of a public address, is I need to make sure that we're recognizing that oftentimes it's the men and women of industry who take time away from their families, answer every beck and call, and risk life and limb, such that people across the world can drive their cars, heat their houses, and turn on their lights. For every lease explored, every well drilled, every barrel or cubic foot of natural gas or oil produced, every megawatt produced, there's a roustabout, a truck driver, a coal miner, or a floor hand who has made it happen on our behalf. And I think it's just absolutely critical that we take a quick moment and reflect on all of these people who over the years who make today possible. And very simply, to all of those hardworking folks, say thank you. We appreciate you for all of your hard work and your dedication to being who we are as a nation and as energy producers. And so I just can't move on without recognizing the importance of that. And it really plays into the San Juan experience, who we are as a community. I'm from northwestern New Mexico, small town named Farmington, New Mexico. And we are not only a coal producing area, but we're also a natural gas producing area. And so since 2008, we have seen a massive decline in our health and wealth since the global economic crisis, largely based upon the collapse of natural gas prices, and then ultimately the closure of the San Juan Generation Station. The San Juan Generating Station shuttered its doors finally in October of 2022, and the coal mine that services that power plant will be handing out final checks to their workers today. So it's somewhat apropos that I'm giving this talk today because of the impact to our community. So in 2016, Farmington Metropolitan Statistical Area was identified in the Wall Street Journal as one of America's fastest shrinking cities. And our unemployment rate at one point was at 7.8%. Our population shrank by 8.8% over the last 5 years at one point, and faster than any other metro in the country. The impact to our economy has been significant and is undeniable. And we collectively are the definition of an economically, socially, and racially disadvantaged community. I come today with a story that we're worried and that we need hope, but we do see hope in the future. And the hope is really in this conversation about providing sustainable growth in energy transition communities.
Jason,
the first thing
Jason,
Mark, go ahead, please.
I'll jump in right there. As you talk about energy transition, on the slide that Jason was just on, and his previous slide about talking about the men and women who make everything happen. As you look at this, not only is it an economic issue and a factor when you look at transitioning from one type of energy to another, it's really affecting the people. And you need to make sure you understand that, and that any activity that you do in energy transition from a policy perspective is that you take into account what happens to those people. And then you make sure that you look towards how can you help those people retrain, repurpose, and be able to maintain their livelihood where they call home and not have to relocate. I grew up in the opposite corner of the state of New Mexico from Jason, in a small community called Raton. I witnessed a coal mine shut down there in the early 1990s. Those were over economic factors of coal. It had nothing to do with energy transition. But I can tell you what happens to those people and the shrinking of a community. And you need to, whatever you do, take into consideration how those people are affected, how you can help them on the short term, on a financial basis, to keep them their feet on the ground and a roof over their head, and how you can help them long term to transition into other types of industries. I can't stress enough, it's more than just policy about global climate. It's more than just policy about energy. It's policy about men and women, and you need to take that into consideration when you look at this.
That's exactly right, Mark. As I like to say, it's about more than jobs. It's about putting food on the table for our families. So the first thing I want to point out is that the Western Governors Association passed a policy resolution in 2018. It's 2018-04, entitled "Energy in the West." And the focus of the conversation that I want to have moving forward is how states are working together and how they should be working together to promote a new energy economy on behalf of the Western United States, and the globe. And it was really encompassed in this policy resolution passed in 2018. And I'll just focus on goal number 4, where it is specifying where states work together to advance efficient environmental review, siting, and permitting processes to facilitate energy development and the improvement and construction of the necessary electric grid, pipeline infrastructure, and while ensuring environmental and natural resource protection. So the governors came together and identified we need to be working collaboratively on energy related issues. And looking to objective number 7 for that goal, increasing cooperation on interstate projects through interstate compacts and other tools. And so really like to focus on how New Mexico is working with other states to accomplish those goals. The first kind of plank in that platform then is looking at New Mexico's Energy Transition Act, which was passed in 2019. We were the first state that I am aware of passing a statutory renewable portfolio standard, at least in the Rocky Mountains. And the Energy Transition Act that was passed in 2019 established that the state would produce 50% carbon-free electricity by 2030, and then 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050. The legislation also provided an avenue for securitization for the San Juan Generation Station, which at the height of production produced 1,848 megawatts of electricity for millions of households and countless businesses across New Mexico, Arizona, California, and Utah. And the primary owner is Public Service Company of New Mexico, along with other partners. And so the law provided an avenue for the securitization of the generation station. It also established that replacement power would be located in the affected area, and that has now been determined to be replacement power, which will be solar. And I think an important point to bring out is that replacement power still isn't built, based upon a number of the legal wranglings that have occurred over the implementation of this legislation. The Energy Transition Act also provided for $20 million for direct payments to affected workers, so retirements and severance for workers, and then also established another $20 million for assistance funds into the community, which was split between 3 different departments governed at an executive level by the governor's office, the Department of Workforce Solutions, which was to receive $12 million, the Indian Affairs Department, that was to receive $2 million, and $6 million for the Economic Development Department. Mark?
Jason, if I could jump in there, and I know everybody kind of looks at Jason's title and says, what's a convener? And that is part of what happened in the ETA legislation that was passed in 2019. That $20 million of earmarked money very specifically stated that the three departments named the Workforce Solutions, Indian Affairs, and Economic Development were to appoint persons to be conveners. Each department appointed a person to be a convener. And then it was the convener's responsibility to adopt or appoint or gather a commission known as the Economic or the Energy Transition Act Commission. And they have been charged with meeting in 3 public meetings to gather input from citizens, affected workers, as to the best route forward, a really grassroots, ground up approach to the idea of what's the answer. We tried not to come in as the state being, the state's gonna come in and tell Farmington how to do things. The state is listening to the citizens of the area to determine what's the best way forward for these people. And so it was a really great plan that was hugely interrupted by a thing called COVID, and really hampered our efforts to convene public meetings, gather people, and everything else. So that's why it's 2022 and we're still not quite through that and the legal wranglings that Jason mentioned, but we're getting there. And we're very close to the end of the rainbow where we are going to determine how best to deploy this $20 million to the benefit and the job growth of the area. So I think it's a good approach that we tried to take here from a grassroots effort, gathering information from the citizens most affected, directly and indirectly. But again, the best laid plans sometimes don't work out, but I still think it's a good approach when you look at that. The last thing I'll say on this is I heard, I believe it was Amanda mentioned before we got started about the previous webinar saying that they don't have at this point any energy transition policies in some of the states. It's not a matter of if it'll happen, it's a matter of when it will happen. And so if you're not in that position yet, you need to start getting there and get out in front of it because it will happen. And these people will be affected. I greatly encourage you though to listen to the people that are going to be affected and really truly understand their skill sets so that you can design your transition, your new jobs, your new economy, to best fit those skill sets.
So with the ETAC then, conveners were selected, as Director Roper just pointed out, and as a group, we decided to work collaboratively to build a unified community advisory committee instead of a committee for each department. And the idea was using a base closure commission as a model, and really trying to think about how communities are able to regenerate themselves upon a base, a military base, making a decision to leave a community. And there's been terrific examples across the nation about how that base closure commission is very, very effective in bringing community members together and driving consensus. And so from the very beginning, it was established that we would work collaboratively and use this base closure commission as a model, recognizing that the governor and the legislature in the legislation recognized and prioritized the very unique landscape of the affected area of northwestern New Mexico. The legislation very clearly understands the impact on the tax impact to the local school district. It understood the impact of the natural gas commodity price decline since 2008 and the impact that that had had toward our community, as well as intergovernmental relationships with the Navajo Nation and other tribal entities. The statutory process, as Director Roper pointed out, was requiring 3 public meetings and formal tribal consultation. And as a commission, we've really kind of gone above and beyond that by reaching out to each of the 29 chapter houses of the Navajo Nation and soliciting input through an RFI process that was established during COVID, where we sought to seek input from anybody and everybody on how they would suggest for these community impact dollars to be expended in the community. As Director Roper pointed out, we are close to the end of the rainbow, so to speak. It looks like we'll be having another meeting in December and hopefully be making some final recommendations as a community advisory commission to each of the 3 state departments on how these funds should be divvied up or expended in an effort to fulfill our responsibility in accordance with the law. Anything on that, Mark?
No, I have nothing to add at this point, Jason.
Okay, good. At the beginning of the conversation, I pointed out that that New Mexico has been looking at energy transition not only through the lens of Energy Transition Act and establishing what that renewable portfolio standard would be, and ensuring that we're working with our tribal nations as very clearly identified through the consultation process that's established in state law as well as recognized in the Energy Transition Act. But we've also joined an organization by the name of Western States and Tribal Nations. And Western States and Tribal Nations are nations, states, and tribal nations working collaboratively, focused on rural economic development, advancing tribal self-determination, and reducing global emissions through clean energy exports from the Western United States. This was an organization that started by commissioning a peer-reviewed study that concludes that exporting Rocky Mountain natural gas to Asia would result in a 40% reduction in life cycle emissions in the region. And there will be a forum hosted at Colorado Mesa University on December 12th, focused on decarbonization efforts along the natural gas value chain in the Western states, including state-led regulations moving to net zero methane emissions, the existing resource base, further identify infrastructure needs and options for financing, and establishing next steps. The members of the Western States and Tribal Nations include the state of Wyoming, Utah, 4 counties in Colorado, the state of New Mexico, the Ute Mountain Utes in Utah, the Southern Utes in Colorado, and at this meeting on December 12th, the Jicarilla will be joining as well. There's a good number of people that are very much involved in this conversation about how we can work together in line with that Western Governors Association directive on how we can collaboratively focus on rural economic development in these energy producing states.
The only thing I'll add there is, Jason, I think we all need to recognize that we're energy producing states, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. The mountain region is definitely energy producing states, and we're going to continue to be energy producing states. We just need to adapt to what the future is going to bring.
And I think that that's the perfect springboard, Mark, to WISH, which is in some ways, the initiative was born much from the background work that was put forth by New Mexico's national labs, Los Alamos National Labs and Sandia. And I'd really like to give a shout out to George Guthrie, who headed up the iWest program there at Los Alamos National Labs, that really began to think about regionalization, which is very much in line with that directive that came from the Western Governors Association. So following the New Mexico's 2021 legislative session, Governor Lujan Grisham joined with the states of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming in the creation of the Western Interstates Hydrogen Hub by way of a memorandum of understanding. And this type of collaboration is called for, as I said, in the WGA policy resolution. The states committed to collaborate for the development of an interstate hydrogen hub that, quote, advances a compelling vision for a hydrogen economy, including production and use in the Western United States. A public concept paper was released on November 7th, 2022, in an effort to receive permission from DOE to proceed with a full application. The paper highlights 8 major hydrogen projects that will replace coal-fired power plants with a production of 1,000 metric tons per day by year 7 and 1,900 by year 12. Many synergies and opportunities have been identified and presented by this WISH group, especially related to just transition and the Justice 40 initiative as directed by the White House.
What I'll add here, Jason, is obviously the white paper identified the 8 major projects that are proposed for the hub. But as part of that process, we identified in the 4-state region over 130 hydrogen-related businesses. So besides this generation capacity of hydrogen that we're highlighting in the hub in an effort to be one of the hubs, we've also identified all these other types of companies that are part of the hydrogen economy that may not necessarily be part directly of the hub initiative, but will definitely be part of the hydrogen economy that will have a wide range of activities that all relate to the hydrogen economy, from being able to make electrolysis better, more economical, to convert hydrogen, to opportunities for storage and transportation, to opportunities in aviation and mass transportation, which are key to developing the hydrogen economy. So obviously we're hopeful that we'll be one of the hubs selected in that energy, but we truly believe that in New Mexico especially, that we will be part of the hydrogen economy. We already have companies in New Mexico that are focused on hydrogen. We have the ability to transition into hydrogen from our current natural resources and do it in a carbon-free and carbon-neutral situation. So we're very bullish on hydrogen in New Mexico. And, obviously we're hopeful to be part of the federal windfall of money. But in the event that we're not, we're still very well positioned to be a major player in the hydrogen economy.
So the challenges that I see, and this is an opinion that I see before us, specific to the ETA, the Energy Transition Act, and our appropriations and the recommendations that we have, is potential further legal challenges holding up any sort of potential distributions, knowing that those funds were allocated to be invested in the community in advance of the mine closure and the plant closure. And of course, as I said, today is the day that they're handing out final paychecks. So that's the last thing that we would want to see, is further legal challenges in that process. I see as a challenge inadequate infrastructure for the Intermountain West to continue to be a powerhouse for the Western United States and the decarbonization capital of the world. Permitting will present major challenges, and then a lack of NGO support for hydrogen development in the United States. New Mexico had a strong debate, a healthy debate about hydrogen development in the United States, and it's something where there needs to be further discussion and working how we can drive some consensus. So as a recommendation, recognizing that we're out of time, that I have for this very important Energy Transition Academy is to have the affected community's best interest at heart, rather than trying to live to a specific agenda or perceived notion or objective, to remember civility, Be willing to listen, be willing to work together, be willing to work from the inside of a community as well as at the State House, be willing to be flexible, be willing to be nimble. Our experience with the Energy Transition Act has taught us that for sure. And remember that you're dealing with people's livelihoods who might not agree or believe in you, but you have to believe in them. So those are the recommendations that I have. Mark, anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I'll just wrap up by saying I think you really hit it right on the nail right on the head, Jason. Listen, be flexible, be nimble, and back to my original point, these are people and you're dealing with their lives, and understanding how it's going to truly affect them is critically important to however you transition.
Thank you for that, Mark. And we feel very proud to be representing the state of New Mexico with the Energy Transition Act and the work that's being done across the Western United States to lead the energy transition, as has been very clearly pointed out and directed by our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham. So thank you very much, Amanda, and Colorado State University, and all of the others in putting together this academy and for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Right, very much. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, Director Roper and Jason, thanks so much. And I'm sure that having a governor get reelected helps with keeping things on track and moving in the right direction. So I appreciate that. So we're going to transition to Arizona, and we're very happy to have Supervisor Fowler on the line. She, I think, has worked on these issues probably longer than most of the people on this webinar. So Supervisor Fowler, if you want to come off mute and put on your video, we'd love to hear your remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this session, and thank you for inviting me to tell our story from our region. I'm Lena Fowler, Coconino County Supervisor. I was elected in 2009 to the position, so I'm in my fourth term for working on this. We're in Coconino County, Northern Arizona. We're a very diverse community. Coconino County is it is the largest land-based county in the lower 48. And we have 6 tribes within our county. In 2016, the Navajo Generating Station, which was linked to the Peabody coal mine, and it was the only source. They were linked together and they both shut down in 2019. It was announced in 2016, and then it was that closure was extended to 19. So what we've learned from that then is that there really is no support when something like this happens. Here's coal company, people with high paying jobs, high degrees, and the families are stable. They're able to pay their bills. They're able to send their children to college and be able to have health care, insurance, and local counties are receiving their local revenues, tax revenues for their education, library, for healthcare. All of that is in their tribes are getting their, their annual revenue from these companies. Then it shuts down. Well, when it shuts down, what's happened in our region is that there was no corporate responsibility. We asked for it even during our board meeting and out in the community, and there wasn't anything that the company really did. It just up and left. And so their responsibility, they said, was to take care of their employees, and the employees to give them an option to move elsewhere with the company, which and SRP did. Peabody, it just shut down, and the employees just went elsewhere. So when you talk about, support, there really isn't support. And it's really devastating to the families. Our families got divided. Children end up being with their other family members, or the whole family was uprooted and taken elsewhere. You have a population loss, you have your demographics change, your educational level, you have just a ripple effect throughout the whole community, the whole region. In our case, it was in Arizona and also spilled into Utah, King County. So we just really had to come together, try to, and we were doing really well in trying to plan for the future when the pandemic happened, and that really interrupted everything again. But in the meantime, what happened is that your financial support for your community has just uplifted, and your major company that was the anchor of the businesses in the region just left. So it really has impact on the community, the other businesses. And so they, even the education system lost their students as a result of it. Families just divided. And then as a county, I had to figure out, okay, who can come and help? How do we handle this? Because what we were told was that the NGS was going to close in 2024. And here we had just had a meeting in DC and then in Phoenix. And then a week later, it was announced it was going to shut down in 6 months. That was extended to 2019. So we're going through decommissioning right now. There isn't any support from the state. There is just as it was presented in New Mexico, there isn't any in Arizona. And then you don't have in our region, we are not close to a major corridor, interstate or transportation system. We're very isolated, so that created a challenge. We don't have a nonprofit organization that really could help to, bridge different organizations and different local governments. So it just really has devastated the community. So we had to figure out what to do. Well, first thing I looked at was that our demographics, this is going to create a challenge. These individuals that had high degree and high education, they all left. A lot of them left, not all of them, but a lot of them that, especially with the company, they all left. So we started working with the local higher education, NAU, Northern Arizona University, the Nick College, which is a tribal college, Navajo Tech University, and Coconino Community College. I asked them if they would partner, and to my surprise, they said yes. So we started the Northern Arizona College Connection to really focus on how to advance college there. We're looking at the Vocational Education Center where the Navajo Generating Station property was. And we had to figure out how, we're still working on that. Things go very slow, especially after a pandemic. And started working to see what can we do, what is at our fingertips right now, what can we look at, which is in our region is tourism. And so the city of Page is doing, it's trying to do what it can within the city. And then you have Navajo Nation, which is also doing what it can and within their boundaries. But the counties we oversee, they're all pockets within the county. So as a county, we're looking at all the agencies, even the federal agencies, the parks within our agency. So we started the Trails Alliance. We just received a grant from the Arizona Tourism Office to map out some trails. That was something we could do right away. The Northern Arizona College Connection as well. Started the Workforce Development Network, because here we are, the shutdown, and it's having a ripple effect through the region. So how do we help businesses? And the businesses are still struggling, especially that was one way of having the businesses struggle. Then comes in the pandemic. That just hit that was another big hit. And then I don't know if you all heard, but in our region, we have Lake Powell. Lake Powell is very low, so the drought is having an impact as well. So it's just one major issue after another that we're trying to deal with. So that's really created a really unrest within our county. Then we also are really looking at establishing a economic development alliance, and that was going really well when before the pandemic. We held several conferences. Thank goodness to NACO. NACO started the National Counties Association started the Co-Impact Counties Partnership and Alliance, and Jack Morgan there, he really brought us together, and we're able to have start conversation. That was a really great support. Really showed us how regions can come together and be able to look at that economic development rather than just within your own local area. And that opened up a lot more of the ideas and really support that we were able to bring in. I was able to attend some educational session and share stories. And then today, what we're trying to do now is we're partnering with the Arizona Local First. It's a nonprofit organization well known in Arizona that works with local businesses, trying to bring them in to see how they might be able to help with us in our situation. Navajo Nation has been able to sign an agreement with an home manufacturing company that is on the NGS site right now. So those are really things. Those are the impact when you look at when you have a major. I think it's just a major business in general, but in our case, it was a coal power plant. And how do you, as the power plant was on now, was on Navajo Nation. So all of the authority, the operation, the contracts, and the right now the decommissioning is all within the hands of the Navajo Nation. So how do we as a county, how do I come in as a county official, and how do I bring the city of Page, Navajo Nation communities, the federal agencies like the National Park Service, how do I bring them all together? That was always a big challenge. And that's a challenge that you're going to have is when you have the very diverse geographical area and jurisdictions. Those are things that will be coming before you. But if you work region-wide and just really looking for just staying focused on the betterment of the region, it works a lot better than just focusing on one area, I've learned. And working with the university, we had the university, NAU, Northern Arizona University. I had them early on when this was just announced. We worked with NAU to do a study for us, an economic impact study So that's from that study, we were able to build on that. And then we also looked at the North Rim, Grand Canyon, the North Rim, trying to have them stay open. We had another study there done there, and if it was to stay open year round, it would generate $14 million and, you know, be able to have people work year round. So we've been working on that also. So there's all kind, you work on all fronts and see what the opportunities are there. And anybody that can come around and help you, that's really, really great. The other, right now, the National Counties Association has just started a new program, which is going to be working with co-impact counties and cities, towns. And so it is open to any community that is has been impacted by the coal or power plant, like in our case, that is scheduled to be shut down. Those communities, you have an opportunity to network and learn from other peers and be able to get some help, technical help, which is really what you need, because when you're isolated like you are, we don't have that technical help. We're even challenged with getting a grant writer. These towns, small communities don't have grant writers or even be able to you know, do strategic sessions to be able to see what they can do. So it's better when it's a region-wide effort and bringing everybody together. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and I would encourage you, maybe this session here, maybe in their email, they can share that information, because it's looking at telling your stories. It's looking at peer-to-peer educational sessions, is technical support, and then it's partnered with, it has many partners like ETA and nonprofit organizations. So that support there is really important, and because you feel really alone when something like this happens, and you got to figure out how you're going to be able to you know, help the individual families, rental assistance, utility assistance. These are families that have never asked for help before. Now they're in a situation where, what do we do? How do we do this? We started really, really, I really improved the VITA program. So that's what I'm putting together right now for 2023, which is the free tax preparation for the families or just the community. All of Coconino County right now is growing there. Yeah, Coconino County partnered with United Way, and then United Way decided not to do that anymore. So my office, we're keeping it up. It's a tax preparation, which is free. You become a tax preparer through the IRS, and you become certified, and we just prepare taxes for people. There are many ways to help the individual families and being able to see where there might be an opportunity for them to you know, to be able to deliver that help. And the businesses also. So look at working, hopefully be working, looks like, well, be working with a local first and be able to help some of our businesses, working, knowing who to work with the tribe, with the tribes also. It's not just tribes, but within your own communities. So if you're close to the communities, you pretty much know who to work with and who's going to be working right there and standing with you. So that's what I would share with you. And I'm always available to answer any questions, but there is always something that is popping up and you're trying to address them. But it is not easy. It's a very slow process. You just have to be really patient, and trust that the community is going to come together and be able to decide how you're going to be able to move forward. So thank you. And I really appreciate being on this panel.
Supervisor Fowler, thanks so much. You showed us how much work you've done so far, but so far to go. So let's turn to Ken Clark and hear his remarks.
Very good. Thank you, Amanda. So real quick, for those who have joined later, I'm former Energy Office Director for the state of Arizona. I was in the legislature 2 different times, early 2000s and then into the teens, total of 6 years. I'm the state director now working with the Energy Foundation. This is a coalition, a growing coalition. I have well over 20 member organizations at this point. Arizona has been a challenge. I'm going to keep my comments very short because I know we've got another state to go here. Arizona has been a huge challenge for coal transition. You heard from the supervisor already about the challenges for people in their lives. We have a corporation commission that I don't think has certainly not bought into the importance of coal transition and supporting those communities. APS, for instance, negotiated a $140 million agreement to support coal transition communities, but the Corporation Commission only allowed them 10 million of that to be spent from ratepayer funding. We have a legislature that really does not see this either and probably won't see it anytime soon, but with a governor that has a new governor who during her campaign talked about resilience and talked about energy transition, we think that there are great opportunities. Our coalition has already communicated with the transition team about what the priorities we think are important and crucial, we think, is to stand up an energy office. This is another challenge. Arizona has never had, has not had an energy office since 2017, when the now outgoing governor eliminated it. So through that energy office, we hope to replicate the kinds of good projects we've seen in New Mexico and Colorado in really tackling this issue, leveraging IRA and Infrastructure and Jobs Act funding to truly support rural economic development. There are a lot of folks in these areas who could benefit from clean energy job transition, but we need to get that out there. We need to win friends and influence people, as we like to say. So one of those roles might be helping rural small communities with grant writing to access a lot of the federal dollars so we can work on that transition. There will be a surplus at the Arizona legislature, but we don't know that we'll have the votes to do to get money for transition. Just parenthetically, one of the commissioners who opposed spending that $140 million from APS said, well, the legislature should spend it or it should come from the federal government. Well, let's see if we can get the legislature to do that. We have put together our recommendations for the Hobbs administration. We forwarded that to them, but I would probably be better off at this point to stand for questions at some later time because I know we are running out of time quickly here.
Ken, thanks for that. I think as Arizona has mentioned, there's different pots of money. There's federal money, there's utility money, there's state money, and Arizona's in the position where we're trying to shake some loose from all kinds of different places because it's certainly necessary. And as Supervisor Fowler mentioned, there was nothing forthcoming with the closure of the first plant, and we just absolutely cannot have that again. We need to support Coconino County and the Navajo Nation, as well as the counties that are going to be impacted. So we are going to transition to our last but not least county. And so we've got Alyssa Kay, who's with the Energy Development Office, and then we've got Stuart Clausen, who's with the Utah Association of Counties, and we're going to turn it over to Alyssa.
Hi, thank you so much. It's been really interesting to listen to the previous speakers and to learn how much we have in common as we're dealing with these economic changes. I want to start out by saying that Utah is an all of the above state. And as a net energy exporter, fossil fuels have been and continue to be an economic driver for our state. And much like Arizona and New Mexico, Utah's coal industry has supported energy security and economic development, not just in our state, but across the West. That being said, we are, struggling with the same issues that Arizona and New Mexico are struggling with. In 2015, the carbon power plant closed in Carbon County, Utah, removing hundreds of jobs from this coal-dependent rural community. And the majority of Utah's coal mines have also closed, to the extent that Carbon County now has no coal mines. Our Hunter and Huntington power plants also have pending closure dates. All of this has been devastating to Utah's rural coal communities, and we've seen negative growth rates, much like has been mentioned before, as displaced workers and young people no longer see a future for themselves. They're leaving their homes and their families to move to urban centers that are already overpopulated with skyrocketing real estate rates. So really trading one problem for another. Recognizing this impact, state and local leaders have come together to work on diversifying the economy in Utah's coal country. And at the same time, we recognize that our energy communities are very proud of their heritage and very proud of the work that they have been and continue to do, supporting society, supporting our economic development and our growth. And so while we're looking at diversifying the economy of those communities, we're also looking at how can we continue to take advantage of all of the assets that exist in these communities to continue to support our energy needs. So I want to highlight some of the work that we've been doing, and Stuart will also jump in here and highlight some of the work that's been happening in these communities. And I also want to really recognize that, while I'm speaking from the Office of Energy Development, which is a state office, that these solutions are coming from the communities that are affected, and they're coming from visionary local leaders who see the impacts and see where they want to head and how they want to get there. And really our role is supporting these leaders and amplifying their message. So the first thing I want to talk about is our participation in the Economic Development Administration's Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And if you're not familiar, this is a funding opportunity that was announced last year. We put in an application in October of 2021 and were awarded phase one of that opportunity in December of 2021 and worked with the community to then put in a phase two application in April of 2022. And then unfortunately found out in September that we were not awarded for phase two. However, the funding that came from phase one and the coalition building work that we did in phase one continues to have positive impacts in the region. So we're really excited about that work. So our application for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge was a 4-pillared proposal focused on first, advanced energy research, second, manufacturing innovation, third, entrepreneurship, and fourth, workforce development. So the proposal was really built around the San Rafael Energy Research Center in Emery County, Utah. And the San Rafael Energy Research Center is an institution that was founded by 3 commissioners in Emery County. It's a really great story, and I wish I had pictures, but basically it started with them purchasing a piece of equipment from the University of Utah, which then
Actually, Alyssa, it started with them purchasing a piece of property from Rocky Mountain Power that they were, I don't mean to interrupt, but they were going to do an energy research center, and they had a desire to create a thorium laboratory. And now you can talk about the piece of equipment. Basically what happened with the piece of equipment is the University of Utah, in kind of the old industrial part of Salt Lake City, they had a piece of combustion testing equipment that they were decommissioning and they were just going to turn over for scrap metal. And during legislative session, Senator Hinkins, who represents the area, got money appropriated to Utah State University for them to take this equipment. And we got a call from the head of governmental affairs for USU, and he effectively was like, hey, we have this piece of equipment. I thought it was about the size of a dining room table, but it's the size of like a McDonald's. Do you have a place in Carbon and Emery County where we can put it? And I said, matter of fact, we do. And then we used Utah State's trucking training program. We used students to transfer it on flatbeds. It took 9 loads. And then those commissioners that Alyssa alluded to, the 3 of them took a piece of yellow iron equipment and unloaded the truck. And then they found someone who lived down there who completely reassembled it. And it's now being used by a British company to kind of test feedstocks and see the emissions. I didn't mean to, but it's just and it speaks to what you said, that these are initiatives that are driven not by the state of Utah and not by the federal government, but by local leadership, which is exciting. You can keep talking.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm really glad that you jumped in there, Stuart, and gave that more color because it really is such a great story. Actually, if you want to keep Stuart up on the screen, we really plan to kind of bounce back and forth here. So, forming this coalition around the San Rafael Energy Research Center, then we looked at what other local projects could supplement this application to create the kind of transformational economic development that EDA was looking for. And so the San Rafael Energy Research Center also has a large piece of property that they've acquired next to it. And the plan is to develop a manufacturing center on that property. And so as we were looking at the relationship between the research center and the manufacturing, we recognized that there's a lot of opportunity, not just for commercialization of the research that comes out of the research center, but also for feedstocks from waste from manufacturing. There's just really a synergistic relationship there. And so the proposal is to start this manufacturing center with this manufacturing park with a manufacturing innovation center where local leaders and experts can really incubate a manufacturing industry in this area. In addition to that, so as Stuart mentioned, the San Rafael Energy Research Center has been focused on advanced nuclear technologies. And one of the really exciting future outcomes that we expect from the research center is to be able to produce medical isotopes in the United States, which are currently not being produced in the United States. And so with medical isotopes and really with a lot of the manufacturing needs and products, there is a need for more accessible transportation, particularly air transportation. And so we started looking at the Carbon County Airport and how we could expand the Carbon County Airport as an economic development activity. Utah State University Eastern is operating in this area and has set up a very successful pilot training program at Carbon County Airport. And Utah State University, their main campus in Logan, also has a highly successful aviation maintenance technician program. And as we were talking about the possibilities, we came to understand that the skills that are taught and used in aviation maintenance are one-to-one skills that are related to the energy industry. You know, basically a turbine is a turbine is a turbine. In fact, the certification that aviation maintenance technicians receive. It's an A&P certification, which stands for airframe and power plant. So as we're looking at the changing energy economy, we know that our energy needs aren't going away. Basically, whatever technologies become implemented in this area to take advantage of the existing transmission lines, the railroads, the highly skilled energy workforce that's existed for generations in this area, we know that they're going to still need those skills. And so what we don't want to see is everybody leaving and looking elsewhere in this transitional time. And so these industries that have adjacent skills are really helpful in bridging that kind of transition. Stuart, do you have anything to add there?
First of all, I'm sorry about laughing. I didn't realize that Trent Thompson was on the call, and he direct messaged me, and he hazed me a little bit, Alyssa, for interrupting you. I think these case studies are really exciting. I was thinking about what we would talk about, and I first of all, Jason made opening statements, and what I think is important to recognize that I want to reiterate is that in these communities that we're talking about, there are generations of people that have gone into the earth and extracted a fuel source that has been the foundation for the massive industrial expansion in this country. And then in turn, in places like Carbon and Emory, they then absorbed infrastructure that then provided power for the entire grid. And for me, that's a recognition and a respect, but it also from a skill set, there's an existing kind of skill set within that region that can be leveraged. The three things that I think we think about, and it's really nice to have the relationship that we have with Alyssa, because Alyssa, working from a state perspective, has been so helpful. And then my partner and I created our program 4 years ago that is more about regional delivery of technical assistance, but it's really about projects, programs, and partnerships. And if you have those and then you add them with funding, you can then drive to outcomes. And the nice thing about the Build Back Better grant, although it wasn't awarded, is it was a way to bring together existing projects and existing programs and align them with the appropriate partnerships with Utah State, University of Utah, Weber State, and Brigham BYU. So we have 4 academic institutions that are part of this coalition and extensive amounts of other organizations. And Alyssa, she drove that. She was the project manager, and she did a lovely job because everyone on this call knows how difficult partnerships are. It's difficult within a state, and it's difficult across states because you have differing desires and motivations, and how do you bring them all together? The other thing that the Supervisor Fowler said was technical assistance, and what Alyssa's office does. We were kind of juxtapositioning ourselves with New Mexico because it's pretty obvious that New Mexico, from a top-down level, is kind of leaning into this. I would say Utah is very different. As a transplant to Utah, they're asking for a list of the partnerships. I don't know if you have that readily, if it's on a website. I know maybe the ETA grant application could be posted, but the piece that we do in the state of Utah is we really believe in local control. And as a transplant, I've really observed that, and I'm a firm believer that decisions made on the ground level are the best decisions because they will take root. And there's a multitude, like there's the Weber State relation. I forgot to mention Weber State. So that's 5 academic institutions in the state of Utah or partnership in this. And then the one thing I would add, because I know we're at the tail end, so we had the benefit of hearing what everyone else said. The thing that it speaks to what I'm saying about a case study that I would like to talk about that speaks to kind of existing skill set. There's a company in Carbon County called Intermountain Electronics. and I can post a link to IE. John Houston founded Intermountain Electronics, I don't know, 40 years ago. And Intermountain Electronics has 4 manufacturing sites in the country, one in Denver, one here, and then kind of one in West Virginia and one in Ohio, I think. And they started building electrical systems for mining operations. And they have multiple service offerings, but their biggest growth opportunity is they build very sophisticated switching systems for data centers. And they're working on some pretty massive data center projects. They were looking at doing their corporate expansion either in Denver or in Carbon County. And their CEO, who's based in Denver, wanted the expansion to happen in Denver. We had to create an incentive package that was as close to apples as we could get in the state. And that was work, right? But it was pretty straightforward because the incentives are laid out by statute, and then you're just making the case. We did get the largest, I still think to date, it's the largest incentive ever, post-performance income tax incentive ever awarded by the state of Utah off of the Wasatch Front. So the Intermountain Electronics for, I think it's 15 years, but if they get 30% of all the new payroll they generate, and they're going to add, over the next 10 years, they're going to add 300 jobs. We also got a tax incremental financing package put together. But that speaks to the problem that I think I want to get that these are all successes, but then the problem that we're all dealing with in these communities is, Alyssa said it, you've had a mass exodus of the labor force because they've had to go find jobs elsewhere because their opportunities have dried up. And how do we, as you build the ecosystem and you create the job opportunities, where's the workforce going to come from? And if you can get the workforce, where's the workforce going to live? And what's going to be the infrastructure that we build that? And those are the things we're grappling with. But and Alyssa, I'll let you close. But what her kind of leadership, and it was the leaders who drove it. But Alyssa did such a beautiful job at bringing everyone together and building this coalition that we're now leveraging up and having very productive conversations with some of our major foundations in the state. We're talking to some of the industrial banks, and we're having our regional office. Trent, I'll give you guys a tip hat. You guys are bringing in a bunch of federal partners. I think week after next, where we're going to talk about how to create capital stacks, with federal dollars and foundational dollars. But none of that would have been possible without kind of Alyssa leading out and doing the Build Back Better. And it's sad that we didn't get it. But we're pushing ahead and moving forward and being realistic. For me, having participated, Supervisor, she mentioned NACO, the work that NACO and NATO have done on coal reliant communities, just bringing us together and allowing to share our problems and our opportunities is very uplifting. And the thing that I'll say in a general sense is, at least in the community where Alyssa and I are working, there's not a defeatist attitude. This is an attitude of this sucks. This just sucks, but we're gonna push forward. And our mayor of Price City is the one who asked us to be here. He had to be on another call, he had to be at an event today, but he's an example of the leadership of, we're gonna roll up our sleeves and do the work. And I want to thank is it CNEE? I'm trying to remember y'all's acronym. I want to thank you guys for this convening. Oh, it's right there on your
For new energy economy.
But I'm glad that Governor Ritter had the vision he had, and we're just happy to be part of it. And if we can be helpful, we want to be helpful. And I thank everyone for sharing. And Alyssa, I'll be quiet now. And Trent, thanks for calling me out. You've known me long enough. I have one way to operate, and that's, I just don't know when to shut my mouth.
Stuart, you're never quiet, and that's okay. We like that. And thank you. I appreciate that. As I said before, the Build Back Better proposal really was a group effort, and our office was happy to step in and do the project management for that, and be the lead on that. The Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity also provided grant writing services for the proposal. And so that was hugely helpful, because what we're hearing from our coal communities is that they have the solution. They know what needs to happen, but they don't always have the resources to be able to implement the solutions. And so at the state level, just being able to step in and provide some resources really helped our local leaders and our coal communities to be able to take what they were already doing and take it to another level. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's next as well, because, you know, even though we didn't get phase 2, we're still continuing with phase 1. And the focus right now is keeping the coalition building effort moving, continuing to support the interest in amplifying the needs of the community, and also working on the equity as this transition happens, making sure that it's done equitably. So one of the things that we were able to do with the Build Back Better coalition is set up an equity and opportunity advisory council for the region. That council is continuing and will continue to operate. And so as other federal funding opportunities come up that could support this coal community, the Equity and Opportunity Advisory Council is able to provide the bridge between what are the needs of the community and how that funding can be equitably distributed. And as Stuart mentioned, are we out of time? Okay, I just want to give a shout out really fast to the Economic Development Administration, to Jamie Hackbarth, who's on this call, for really working in conjunction with our coal community to set up this Rural Economic Development Summit on December 14th, where we'll be able to bring federal partners as well as state partners, private industry and philanthropies to the table to see how we can all work together to support the region.
Thank you. So sorry to cut people off. I think we need so much more time to get in depth, but appreciate CNEE pulling us all together. So Suzanne, I'm going back to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks to all of our speakers. And I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your schedules. I know everybody's busy. And we are going to transfer the questions that we see in the chat over to the webinar, our discussion webinar for next Tuesday on December 6th. So please do join us for that discussion webinar. Like Amanda said, we really do need more time to talk about all of these things. I wish we could all be together in person. That'd be better. And I promise we won't put anyone on the spot on December 6th. You won't have to talk if you don't want to, but it's a chance to ask questions to these speakers that you've heard today and also on Tuesday from our other 3 states, and do really a deeper dive into what you're interested in. So we hope you'll join us. There will be no presentations next Tuesday. It'll just be conversations. And then also as a reminder, we have a resource page on our website. And if you have suggestions, you can email those to us and we can put them up on the website. You know, some of the programs that Supervisor Fowler talked about from NACO and NATO, we can put those ones up on the website so you can look there to have access to them. And we will also email you, Carlin will email you a follow-up from today with links to the ones that we have in the chat for today. So you all have those in case you forgot to grab them. And I hope the month is starting well for you. It's December, so happy December, everybody. And we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.